Okay, welcome everyone. This is our 1 o'clock Eastern reading. I'm going to introduce everyone to kind of get that out of the way. We're going to have one more, hopefully, author, but she's running a little late, Jane Walsh. And then I'm going to ask one quick question of everyone, and then we'll get right into our readings. So, like I said, welcome everybody. The first person I'm going to introduce is M.A. Binfield. She's stranded on that little island off the coast of France known as the United Kingdom. It's a magical place with endless mugs of tea and lots of kinds of weather that make you stay at home to read and write. So welcome, M.A. You can wave everybody. All right, our next one is Darry, who lives in London with her rescue cat. When she's not working or writing, she can be found amongst the weeds in her allotment trying to make vegetables grow. So welcome, Eden. Nice to see you. And then David S. Pederson was born in Leadville. Is it Leadville or Leadville?
Leadville.
Colorado. Okay. Where his father was a miner. Soon after, the family relocated to Wisconsin, where David grew up and attended high school and university, majoring in business and creative writing. So that worked out well for you. Landing a job in retail, he found himself relocating to New York, then Massachusetts, and eventually back to Wisconsin, where he currently lives with his husband. He has written many short stories and poems and is passionate about mysteries, old movies, and crime novels. When not reading or writing, he's working in the furniture business. David also enjoys working out and studying classical ocean liners, floor plans, and historical homes. Hysterical every once in a while. So Death Checks In is a 2019 Lambda Literary Award finalist. So welcome everybody. And I wanted to ask, and I'm Vali. I have written the Devil series, and my latest book is County Med. So I'm going to be reading, but I'm also the moderator today. So let's start back with M.A. M.A., what's your biggest, well, it's a question for everybody. What's your biggest writing quirk?
Oh, God. I don't know. I don't know if it's a quirk. It's kind of tragic. Okay, I wrote like an entire book on my elbows on the floor because my back was so bad. And I can't quite reach them, but I've got skateboarding elbow pads over there because it got so sore after a while. I literally couldn't stand or sit, that I was wearing skateboarding pads so that I could type like this on my laptop. So it's quirky, kind of traumatic, but quirky, I think, yeah.
I think that would qualify. How about you, Eden?
So recently we got an armchair with a footstool, and I've taken to sitting in that like a king or queen. And I like order someone to go and get me a cup of tea or something whilst I, yeah.
To get you a little pen with a crown on the top.
Yeah. Very regal. So it's got quite a hard back, so you're kind of sat quite upright, and yeah, I've been enjoying that recently. So,
what about you, David?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. When M.A. first said she wrote an entire book on her elbows, I was picturing her writing on her elbows.
It's a very short book.
Very short, yeah. It's a good question. My biggest writing quirk, my husband would probably say I sing while I write little bits and pieces of songs, which just helps me concentrate. So I'm forever singing, humming, whistling, and making noise while I write.
All right. I think my biggest one, well, everybody thinks it's a little quirky that I write all my books out first with my multitude of fountain pens that I own. But I also I love to cut grass. A lot of people know that as well. And I talk to myself while I'm doing that, but I'm working out either how to kill someone or how to get someone to fall in love. So it makes the grass cutting a little bit more interesting. So M.A., how about you lead us off in the reading? And while she is reading, if everyone can turn off their video and mute their computer, we'll give M.A. the floor.
Thanks, Sally. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to read from my current contemporary romance called Never Be the Same, which was out a few weeks ago, I think. It's a sort of opposites attract romance between a sort of hot TV star who's in a sort of really hot queer TV show. Think, I guess, Kate Money or Shane McCutcheon or something like that. And her driver, her English, very buttoned up driver, she's in London for a promotional tour for a few weeks, and her driver, Casey, he's driving her around, and her name is Olivia Lang. We shouldn't do this. Casey was standing in the open doorway, her arms braced against the door frame, as Olivia, her arms threaded around her waist, tried to pull her into the room. Casey held firm, knowing that if she gave in, there would be no way she'd be able to resist Olivia in the presence of a bed when she so obviously wanted exactly what Casey wanted, what Casey had to admit she'd wanted since the moment she first set eyes on her. When Casey refused to budge, not allowing Olivia to pull her inside, Olivia leaned in, her eyes giving away what she was craving as much as the hands that were now under Casey's shirt, the nails raking across her back. Olivia finally touched her lips to Casey's. They were warm and soft, but the kiss was hard and hot, and Casey felt the power of it in the heat, in the throb between her legs. She couldn't stop herself from responding. She reached her hand into the hair at the nape of her neck and crushed her mouth against Olivia's. And when Olivia parted her lips, she deepened the kiss, dipping her tongue into Olivia's mouth. The warm, wet softness of Olivia's tongue, mixing with the taste of the bourbon, causing the throbbing between her legs to grow stronger. Casey pulled Olivia closer, wanting to feel her body, her breasts pressed against her own, her tongue teasing Olivia, their kisses hard and wanting. Not quite senseless, Casey heard a door open and close. She still hadn't crossed the threshold into Olivia's room, and she realised how reckless they were being, how visible they were to anyone using the corridor or coming out of their room. She'd only agreed to come upstairs with Olivia because she didn't want her to get photographed downstairs in the lobby while she was drunk, but it would be much worse if someone caught them doing this. The easiest thing would be to let Olivia pull her into the room, to lay Olivia down on the big bed and do everything they clearly both wanted. Instead, she heard herself speaking. "We can't do this, Olivia." She pulled away, taking a step back into the corridor. "We can. You want to. I can see it in your eyes." Olivia stepped into the corridor to kiss Casey again. "I can feel it in your kisses." She ran a hand down Casey's abdomen, stopping halfway down the zip of her jeans. "I can feel it in your muscles." Casey couldn't stop herself from tensing under the touch, proving Olivia right. "It's not about how much I want to. That's not what matters." Casey moved Olivia's hand. "I'm someone who works for you. And in the morning, sober and annoyed with yourself for getting drunk enough to fuck your driver, you're not going to want me around to remind you. And I need this job. You know how much I need this job." Olivia stepped backward into the room. They looked at each other for a beat. Casey didn't know what else to say to make the truth of their situation any different. "It matters." Olivia spoke softly. "What matters?" "It matters that you want to, that you're only saying no because of the job and not because of me." Assuming that's the truth, Olivia backed further into the room, putting more distance between them. Casey stepped into the doorway, forcing herself to relax, trying to chase away the arousal she was still feeling. She put her hands in her pockets, hoping it would stop her from reaching for Olivia. "I'm saying no because of the job. I'm also saying no because you're drunk, and I don't take advantage of women who are drunk, no matter how attractive they are, and yeah, how much I might want to. But I also want to be able to look you in the eye in the morning, and I don't want to get fired, and I wouldn't have you fired. Can you please stop saying that?" Olivia's eyes flashed with annoyance. Even annoyed, she was glorious. Okay. I was just going to say that I want you hydrated and not too hungover to slay them at your TV thing in the morning." Casey was trying to get them back to where they should be. She was trying to minimise the damage. "So I'm trying to seduce you, and all you want to do is hydrate me." "Great." Olivia sat on the edge of the bed with a sigh. "Maybe my ex was right, and I do need to learn a thing or two from Susie. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be saying no to her." She sounded petulant, but underneath, Casey could hear the upset. Olivia let out a huge yawn. She looked down at her shoes and reached down to unstrap them, fingers fumbling with the tiny buckles. Casey looked around the room as if assessing the danger to the both of them if she crossed the threshold. Let me. She went inside, crouched down at Olivia's feet and began to unbuckle her shoes. She'd had a lot to drink and the arousal was still thrumming through her body. She was showing a lot of trust in herself to be this close to Olivia and to resist kissing those lips, the lips that she now knew tasted as good as they looked. Olivia, she looked up at her. If you were Susie, I wouldn't even be here. I wouldn't have taken you to the Shard today. I wouldn't have been so happy to see you sitting there when I got back to the hotel. And I wouldn't be sitting here helping you to take off your shoes while contemplating pushing you back onto that bed and leaving myself unemployed and my mum homeless. Olivia covered her face with her hands and moaned. The sound of it low in her throat made Casey aroused all over again. She placed Olivia's shoes next to the bed side by side, and got up, needing to be a little farther away. I don't know Susie, but I know you, and I can't believe she's anywhere near as amazing as you are, Olivia. She recognised her own voice, but couldn't quite believe she was the one saying all this to Olivia. What happened to that buttoned-up English reserve? She turned and walked to the door. Now make sure you get some coffee and some water. We both have an early start tomorrow. And I don't suppose it's any consolation, because of you, Olivia, not Susie. I'm going back to my room now for a very long, very cold shower. Casey left the room, letting the door close behind her. Fuck. She let the curse out softly as she leaned with her back to the wall. Falling for Olivia was ridiculous and a total fucking cliche. She was the driver, the hired help, and letting herself get used by an actress who was looking for comfort and reassurance about her sex appeal was the last thing her own self-esteem needed right now. Gina would tell her to stop looking for love, to stop being so bloody cautious and go back and simply enjoy what was on offer. But that was Gina, not Casey. Casey had always loved with her heart first. She pushed herself off the wall, a cold shower. She called it right. It was exactly what she needed. So that's my reading from Never Be the Same.
Ooh. Oh, hot. Very good. Very good.
It's the evening in the UK. We're allowed to live lucky. I'm sorry, it's 1 in the
It's only noon where I am, but it's always welcome. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask some questions at the end, but there is a question for everybody who's in here down at the bottom right hand of your screen that it says Q&A. If you have a question for either MA or any of the other ones, or a question for everyone, please go ahead and drop that into the Q&A questions. And because I try to keep up with the chat, but it's kind of hard to do questions in the chat. So put them in that Q&A box. All right, thanks, MA. Okay, the next one is Miss Eden Darry. Eden, you want to go ahead and entertain us?
Thank you. First of all, I'm just getting over a bit of a cold, and I've got a bit of a cough, so I apologise if I start coughing. I'm going to try not to. So I've got a new book out called Quiet Village. It's out now, came out this month, and it is about a woman who gets custody of her niece when her sister dies. They move to a new village where strange things start happening, and they start getting stalked by something which potentially is not quite human. So I'm going to read an extract from it, and this takes place fairly early on in the book where no one's still really sure what's going on, and hopefully it will explain itself. Collie put the DVD back in its case and switched off the TV. Lana had taken herself off to bed. Collie said she'd look in on her, not knowing if Lana was too old for that now or not. Either way, she hadn't said anything, not that she would. Collie got the impression Lana was on her best behaviour. Aside from the grief, there was a stiffness and formality that hadn't been there before. Collie hoped it would go away. The last thing Lana needed was the stress of being on her best behaviour on top of everything else she was going through. Collie thought she'd call Tony in the morning and see what he thought. As she switched out the light in the living room, she heard a scream, and then the sound of a dog barking ferociously. What the bloody hell was that? It sounded like it came from the front of the house. Collie remembered there was one other house on their drive, positioned up a small drive of its own. Should she go and check or call the police? Ordinarily, she wouldn't hesitate to go and look, but she had Lana to worry about now. Collie, what was that noise? Collie turned to see Lana stood on the stairs looking worried. I don't know. Listen, I'm going to go and see. Keep the door locked and don't come out, all right? Collie said. Lana nodded. Collie was very aware of the thing earlier that marked her door. Was this part 2 of that, or was someone genuinely in trouble? Of course, it might be nothing at all. The amount of times in London she'd been ready to dial the police when she heard screaming and it turned out to be drunk people walking home. This wasn't London, no. Collie stepped outside into the night. She breathed in deep and started walking up the path. You couldn't see the other house from this angle. It was totally obscured by trees. Collie strained her ears to listen for any other sounds. Nothing. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. Collie used the light from her phone to guide her way. There were no lights down here at all, and the moon was still just a sliver in the sky. She started up her neighbour's small drive, and as she came around the bend, she saw lights blazing in the downstairs window and the front door wide open. Collie started to call out when something hit her from behind. Lana peeked through the curtains in her bedroom. Her window looked out onto the driveway, and she saw Collie and her torch bobbing their way up the path before she disappeared up the neighbour's drive. Was this to do with whatever banged on their door this morning? Lana thought the thing in the bushes on the drive was just her imagination, but what if it was real? What if there really was something lurking in there? That wasn't possible, was it? How many times had her mum told her there was no such thing as monsters? So many times that Lana believed it. But what if her mum was wrong? Lana had been getting into bed when she heard the scream. She was used to hearing things like that in London. Idiots being noisy because they were drunk or just messing about. But out here it was strange. Everything was so quiet at night and all you could hear were owls and foxes, night animals. Lana waited for the light from Collie's phone to reappear. Why did she go and look? Why didn't she just call the police? After Mum died, when Lana found out someone put a picture online as the dead woman's daughter, she'd been desperate to get away, go somewhere nobody knew her. Collie suggested the country and she'd jumped at it. Now she was beginning to wonder if she'd made the right decision. She missed her house, she missed her friends, and she missed her life. Who let a 10-year-old make decisions anyway? Collie did. Lana could have asked for a pony and Collie would have got her one. Lana carried on staring out the window. Where was Collie? Out of the corner of her eye, Lana saw something move. She cried out and jumped back from the window. Collie. Collie's out there with it. Lana ran downstairs and grabbed a knife from the kitchen cupboard. It was as long as her arm, but it still felt useless and weak. She may as well have been holding a banana. Only Silver will stop that thing. And that was a ridiculous thought. It wasn't a werewolf. Those things were make-believe. All the same, Lana reached back in the drawer and pulled out an ornate cake knife Collie only used for special occasions, like cutting birthday cake. She said it belonged to Collie's mother and was made out of pure silver. Lana wasn't sure if Collie was just winding her up as usual, but it wouldn't hurt to take it just in case. Lana stepped out onto the garden path. She'd forgotten to put on shoes, but at least she had 2 knives. She felt stupid and small and useless. But she wasn't going to let that thing get Collie. She hadn't been able to help her mother, but she wasn't going to lose her aunt as well without at least trying to help her. Lana made her way cautiously up the path. The gravel trips were rough beneath her feet, but at least the ground was dry. Her attention was fixed on the bushes and on trying not to run back into the house. Her heart hammered in her chest and the cold night air made her cheeks sting. Nevertheless, she kept on. She got to the gate. Suddenly, from her left came a loud rustling. Something was coming. Lana widened her stance and held the knives up ready for whatever came out and tried desperately not to be afraid. She felt something move up behind her and almost bolted, but just as quickly realised whatever it was behind her wasn't it. Was it Collie? She didn't dare turn to look, but Collie would have said something. Whatever it was, it gave Lana confidence and made her feel almost protected. It was good. She planted her feet and prepared to face the thing in the bushes. And that's it. I'm done. And I didn't cough, which is good.
I think the best compliment, Tammy Lynn just said, Quiet Village is fucking terrifying, but I loved it.
Thank you.
So, that's a good one. All right, I think he always has the best background. So David is going to read. This is the 7th one in the series, correct?
Yes, it is. Yep, the 7th.
All right. So take it away, Mr. David.
Okie doke. So yeah, Death Foretold is my 7th in the Heath Barrington Murder Mystery series. It takes place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1947. And the scene I'm going to read, Heath is dropping by the library to check out some books on spiritualism, which he hopes will assist him in researching the all-seeing Almanzo and find out if he's a legitimate spiritualist or a fraud. Miss Caldwell, the librarian Heath first met in Death Overdue, is at the circulation desk. So let's drop into a rendering I created of the library, shall we? And see if you can spot a couple of the Heath Barrington books I put on display, by the way. And remember to keep your voices down. Well, if it isn't Detective Barrington, she said, setting the magazine she'd been reading aside. Hello, Miss Caldwell. Nice to see you. So, who's been murdered this time? What? No one I know of. I'm investigating potential fraud is all, and I was hoping to do some research on spiritualism. Potential fraud? Is that a crime now? So glad my tax dollars are hard at work paying your salary. And I'm so glad my tax dollars are hard at work paying yours so you can read magazines. Touché. That means you made a good or clever point or retort, also used in fencing when one is hit by one's opponent. Yes, I took fencing in college for a while. Why am I not surprised? And tennis, I imagine. Yes, actually. How about you? Were you on the women's boxing team? Funny man. No, I wasn't. But I could knock you flat on the mat. I throw a wicked corkscrew punch. Of that I have no doubt. I probably wouldn't last 3 rounds with you. Probably not 2. So, this must be some potential fraud you're investigating to bring you in this early and on a Saturday. Just making sure you get your money's worth out of your tax dollars, Miss Caldwell. Now, where would I find books on spiritualism? Clearly you're rather helpless. Typical man. Very well, this way then. She stepped out from behind the desk and led me toward the stacks in the rear of the building. Are you this hostile with all your customers, Miss Caldwell, or just the men? Just the annoying ones, and the annoying ones are usually men. Case in point. Why do I get the feeling you'd actually like to be a man? She glared at me sideways as we walked. That is a terrible thing to say. You're right in that men have certain privileges in life, certain things open to them that are not open to women, but I aim to change that. If I may quote Eleanor Roosevelt, no, I have never wanted to be a man. I have often wanted to be more effective as a woman, but I have never felt that trousers would do the trick. Okay, touché, as you say. And for what it's worth, I agree with you. Then you're less of a man than you appear. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Thanks. You're welcome. She stopped short and pointed to a bookshelf. Here's the section you want, the spirit world and the occult. Thanks. I'm looking for books on spiritualism in particular. Oh, and one written by an Almanzo Firestone. Firestone. Let me see. Her eyes moved up, down, and across the shelves. Here it is, Spiritualism, Seances, and the Afterlife by Almanzo Firestone. She pulled it off the shelf and handed it to me. And may I suggest a Victorian Guide to Spiritualism? You may find it helpful. Sure, if you think it merits reading. It can't hurt. Here. She plunked it down on top of the other one. Anything else? I think this will do nicely, Miss Caldwell. Thank you. I truly appreciate your assistance. You're an asset to this library. How funny you are, Mr. Barrington. Not like a typical man. Not at all. Walk with me to the circulation desk so I can check these out for you. Well, who wants to be typical? I said, walking beside her. Indeed, you're not. In fact, I'd say you're atypical. The greatest compliment I could give you is to say you have female attributes. I set the books down on the counter of the circulation desk. Well, I wouldn't say that. I would. I assume you have a library card? Oh, I did once. I think it expired. I'll let you have these on your word, Detective. But if you don't return them by Friday, I will hunt you down and stamp you but good, so that you will wear the word overdue on your forehead forevermore. Or at least until the ink wears off. Understand? Slug? Slug? I'm referring to banana slugs, of course, and I meant that as a compliment too. Your compliments could use some work. Read up on banana slugs sometime. They're born with both male and female genitalia. Really? I wasn't aware of that. How do they reproduce?
They seek out a mate of similar size, and when they find one, they each impregnate the other. It's far more civilized than what humans do, in my opinion.
But our civilization is based on certain beliefs, certain expectations.
You mean like the men are the breadwinners and protectors, and the women are all docile and caregiving?
Well, yeah, generally that's how it's always been.
We're no longer a cave-dwelling people. Women don't need men to depend on them to club their dinner.
Somehow I think if you were a cave dweller, you'd club your own food.
Of course I would. One should never depend on anyone else for one's survival.
Perhaps you're right.
Yes, but the best solution would be if humans were like banana slugs, all both male and female. There would be far less problems in the world because there would be no great sexual divide, you see?
I do see, and I thank you, from one slug to another. She raised her eyebrows ever so slightly.
For what?
For helping me, and for fighting the fight. What happens next, and what happens after the all-seeing Almanzo turns up dead with his pants down? You'll have to read it to find out.
I love your secondary characters, David. That was great. Thank you so much. So, like I said, we're hoping Jane shows up, but until then, I will do my reading next. And hopefully, like again, don't forget to put those questions in the Q&A box. I'm sure you have something you want to ask these guys. They've done such a great job. So my latest book is Calumet. It is, hopefully you can see that one. I think everyone, well, hopefully everyone has had the experience of going back to their high school reunion. And I've only been to 2 since I've graduated, and they're always kind of interesting. And I was talking about this the other day, and I said, I think that the last one I went to was about 4 years ago. My class actually has a class reunion every 5 years. I don't know why, but that's one of the things in the book that I kind of modeled after my class. But I think my favorite line in the last class reunion that I went to is, I don't remember those boobs. It's like, okay, that made my whole night. So Jackson Levine is living happily in California. She left home after she graduated from high school and has never been back. There was plenty of reasons for that. None of them good. And Iris Long is the girl that she left behind. And she is still living in the same little town in Louisiana. And she is on the committee that is putting the class reunion on. So the last time I read from this book, I read from Jackson's point of view. So today I wanted to introduce you into Iris Long Gravois. So this is their first planning. Well, they're getting close to the reunion, so this is one of their planning sessions. So Iris Long Gravois clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. The reunion wasn't that far off, and they had a lot of planning to do if they were going to have another successful class event. Their class president had left for bigger and better things and had never looked back, so it fell to her and the others who served on the student council to organize everything. This wasn't her favorite set of tasks, but her job at the high school meant she was one of the coordinators by default. The other's reason, she had all the information at her fingertips. Do we have a complete list of everyone from the last time? She asked her good friend, Nancy Lyons. Everyone, including the spouses of the 3 people who passed away. Can y'all believe we lost that many in only 16 years? Nancy shook her head as she handed Iris the list. Adeline and I went ahead and got the invitations ready to mail. Nancy said, mentioning her daughter. If everyone agrees there are no changes to be made, we'll mail them out today. Thank you for doing that, you two, Iris said. She placed a check next to invitations so that they could move on. We've gotten permission from the school board to use the gym at the high school again. I spoke to the superintendent myself. It'll be like reliving prom. Let's hope not, Molly Speller said, making them all laugh. I have no desire to go back to high school. That was a brutal time. Brutal. The booze was horrible, and my bad hip means I have no desire to have sex in the back of a car ever again. The fact that I ever drank Boone's Farm pains me to admit. Not all of it was bad, Iris said softly. High school was a time most people chose not to think about, afterward, unless they were the captain of the football team or a cheerleader. But she'd been happy all those years. After graduation, she'd lost something vital to her, and she'd never gotten it back. Not really. She wasn't unsatisfied with her life, but what if was the question she asked more often than she'd like. Iris girl, you have got to stop romanticizing what was basically a hot mess of a time. None of us could drink legally, drive, or buy a vibrator, Molly said. I'd never go back. And after kids and marriage, if they outlawed wine tomorrow, I'd become a bootlegger. There are certain things I can't live without. The other thing we stupidly did was wish to be treated like adults and have children of our own. Remember how we said we'd raise them so differently? Tori Hopkins laughed the hardest and nodded. God, yes. But then you have them and you wonder how you could survive it without social services showing up at your house on a daily basis. If I'd actually cut a switch every time I threatened to do it, my trees would be bare. And now that they're teenagers, I have to keep myself from committing murder daily. I'd give anything to come home and go to my room and eat pizza rolls, Claire Guidry said. I miss the days when my only responsibility was doing my homework and picking up my dirty clothes off the floor. You were the one who started early on those kids, so you would know what I mean, Iris. Iris smiled, thinking of her after-school activities, then lost it when the gossip that never really died down was brought up again. I wanted a family, but I didn't start that early. She'd actually been pregnant at graduation, but had hidden it well. If y'all don't mind, let's get back to what we need to get through. Y'all can all reminisce about your childless selves later. But the gym, yet again, is there anywhere else we can go? Claire asked. It's the only place we could get with our small budget, and the decorations from the last reunion are in the attic of the high school. Iris swore these women did this every single time just to be obstinate. People act like they're destitute when we plan this thing, so it can't ever be elaborate. You'd swear they're still on an allowance from their parents and are saving for something special. Do you think our fearless leader will ever come back and help with any of this? Molly asked. This was the one thing you had to promise to do when you ran for class president, plan reunions. Besides, I'm sure you'd love to see her, Iris. Did anyone call her? Tori asked. The false sincerity in their voices was hard to take, and Iris knew there was no way any of them had the guts to call Jackson and ask her to come back. Their graduation was the last day they'd all been together, and she missed those times most of all. If there was a way to go back to those years, she'd do it, if only to spend another afternoon with Jackson Levine. She hadn't had any contact after Jax had left, and she'd never expected any. Not after how it had ended between them. For that, she was to blame. Did you? Tori asked her. You two were tight back then. Surely you've kept in touch. Tori was always the instigator in the group and not one of her favorite people. The town of Check Bay, Louisiana wasn't that big, and pretty much everyone knew everyone. You were born here, you grew up and had your own family, and then you eventually died and were buried with all your relatives going back a few hundred years. That's the way things were done, and trying to change it was futile. Some found it comforting that everyone was aware of their neighbor's business, but it was hard keeping secrets when you lived in a fishbowl. She tried her best to keep that part of herself she treasured hidden from everyone. She knew to avoid uninvited attention. Some secrets, though, were hard to hide in plain sight. So that's a little bit out of Calumet. And let's go get everyone off of mute. I think we have one question. Let's see. It said, Tammy would like to know, Eden, how in the world did you come up with such a scary plot?
So we were staying with my girlfriend's family, and they live at the bottom of this long drive, and I work shifts. So sometimes I come back late at night and there'd be something in the bushes. And used to make my brain go. Yeah, it was always a badger or a fox, but yeah.
Now, I remember going to, because every werewolf movie you've ever watched takes place in London. I don't know why that is, but it is. Yeah, and I remember I was in London in college. I spent like 2.5 months in Europe, and our last stop was in London. And we left the train station at like midnight, and we were out trying to find a hotel. and it was this lane, and it was no one, and it was kind of foggy. And then all of a sudden I could hear this jingling. And then every time we would stop walking, it would stop. And he would walk, and it was, so eventually I wanted to hit the girl I was with. Her first, and I was like, you scared the shit out of me. Thanks a lot. So that was my London werewolf story.
Well,
this close to believing that they existed.
Yeah, it's creepy.
So,
At night.
So yeah, no, so that, like I said, if anybody else has any questions, please go ahead and put those in there. But for the rest of us, I wanted to ask, where do you get your ideas for your books? Because I know, Emma, you have 3 books. David's got a whole bunch, and Eden's got quite a few. So where do those ideas come from, Emma?
No, actually, just little bits of things from life, isn't it? Really, I think the one that is out now, this idea of the trope of the driver, the bangable, fuckable driver, and the TV star came from me watching Keely Hawes in some TV program called The Bodyguard, where she plays a politician, and she's got a male driver bodyguard, I think. And I just thought, oh, imagine driving Keely Hawes around town. And then from there, I just that was all. And then I was off with the book. But yeah, I don't know, actually. Just little characters usually come to me first, and then situations or scenes with them in, and then from there a sort of book gets knitted together usually. But yeah. Okay. London features a lot in my books. No werewolves, but I miss London. I lived there for 25 years, and somehow I think I must want to go back there, because often the books have sort of got London in them as a character almost. So yeah.
Well, you and Eden should get together and write a werewolf story. I'll read it.
A romantic werewolf story.
Exactly. How about you, David? Where all those ideas come from?
Oh my goodness. Some from real life events, some definitely just straight out of my mind. Death Foretold. It's the book I wrote right before this was a prequel to all the other Heath Barrington mysteries, and so I wanted to get the main character back up to date in 1947 and back to Milwaukee. And so, of course, writing a murder mystery, I'm like, oh, someone's got to be murdered. So who's it going to be? And I originally had the idea for an opera singer, and I was going to name it Does Sing Soprano, which I still like that title. I still may use that, but down the road. But then I thought, well, making it about a spiritualist, traveling spiritualist might be more interesting. So yeah, they just kind of evolve, and I do use some real life events and some composites of things that have happened, and then I tweak them as we go. But yeah, most of it comes right out of my twisted mind. So
thank God for that. How about you, Eden?
Yeah, probably like my anxieties. Yeah, like it's never, just the pipes in the house or whatever. It's always somebody in, somebody's there. So I think my nightmares, my worst fears.
You should have squirrels in your attic.
Yeah.
Nightmares. Especially when they eat through all your air conditioning ducting.
Oh, yeah, no, we didn't have that, but yeah.
Different kind of nightmare. That's when your house becomes hysterical. Oh, David. So so what got you interested in writing, Eden?
I think I've always had an interest in it. I've always loved reading, and I think I started getting into like lesbian and stuff, and then just one day decided to have a bash at it myself, and that was it really. It was like we'll have a good story.
Turned out well for you.
Yeah, had a crack at it, and there we are.
How about you, David? I know you took creative writing, but what got you from that academic into actually creative writing?
I think being a big reader led me to being a big writer. I've always read. My first book that I ever read was Green Eggs and Ham. So So I've always been a huge reader. I was a big Agatha Christie fan back in the day, and mysteries always intrigued me, like trying to figure it out, and how does that work, and how do they place the clues? And it was always so intricately done, and I thought, well, I'd love to try that. So I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. So yeah, I love writing. It's a passion of mine. So.
Oh, good. I also wanted to tell you, I love your tie. It's really nice.
Oh, thank you.
How about you, Emily? No, it's beautiful.
I love his tie as well too. Yeah. Yeah, same, I suppose. I've always written as a hobby, just for fun, from being a kid. I think when I was at school, I was a really bad singer and I wasn't allowed in the choir. I think I was the only kid as well that wasn't allowed in because I was so terrible. And I used to spend an hour writing a story every week and sort of reading it back to my classmates when they came back from choir. So I've always wanted to write, and then I wanted to take some time off work, and I just needed a good reason to tell my boss that she would give me a few months off work. So I told her I was going to write a book, and then I kind of had to, because I thought she would have found me out if I didn't. So it was for odd reasons that I started.
Your elbows.
Just to get
it that much harder.
But yeah, I'm a reader too, like David. I think when you read a lot, I read a lot of mysteries, and my books are romances, but I read everything. I read mysteries, I read classics, all sorts. I read a lot of romance too, but yeah.
Good. Yeah, no, I'm a big reader. I write a lot for my day job. I write grants and I write a lot of memos and stuff. And it wasn't until I think the third Harry Potter book had come out, and I got him as a Christmas present. And the person gave it to me, and I was like, seriously? And then I started reading them, and I actually liked them. And then I don't know, something popped into my head, and I thought, well, maybe I could do this. Let me give it a shot. See if I can write something longer than a memo. And that's when I wrote Carly Sound, actually, which was not the first one published, but because it needed some work. But that is actually where the devil was born. So Kane Casey came into my life, thank God. And I've never looked back yet. So, but and I know we've all been, and we're still on Zoom, unfortunately, but it's nice to see everybody's face. But I know we've been stuck inside, and I don't know in England how y'all are doing, but in the United States, we're going through a horrible second wave of this Delta variant. And because we have a bunch of people who refuse to get vaccinated, but that's their prerogative. But I know getting stuck inside, I've done a bunch of stuff that I hadn't really done in a long time. So I grew a vegetable garden and stuff. But the other thing I learned how to do is to make some new cocktails. So what was everyone's favorite pandemic cocktail? MA, how about you?
I don't know much. I don't drink cocktails. I'm a red wine and dark beer girl. So yeah, I can't remember.
Did you discover anything new while you were?
I'd say I sort of just cooked and baked for the first time. I'm not a good cook, and I've never gardened very much like that. Yeah, so I made a banana loaf that looked like a shoe. Just sort of kicked on. I mean, it tasted all right. It just looked terrible. I just kicked on from there, really. But yeah, maybe I should try cocktails.
Helps with the baking.
It's like a good hobby. Yeah, it sounds like a good hobby.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite British things, is the Great British Bake Off. I love it.
Yeah.
So how about you, David? Mix up any drinks while you were stuck in home?
I'm always making drinks. I do love a good martini, vodka or gin, and it's always got to have blue cheese stuffed olives. And we just started stuffing our own olives. So we buy the unfitted olives, and we buy the blue cheese, and we stuff them ourselves. It's a lot fresher, and it adds to the drink. Of course, my character Heath Barrington drinks his with pickle. Find out why he does that, you have to read Prelude, which is a book beforehand. But and pickle's not bad in a martini. That's actually is a thing, but I definitely prefer blue cheese olives and a good martini. You can't beat it.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of blue cheese, but when you soak it in, a little vermouth and a lot of vodka, they're actually very good. those blue cheese stuffed olives. So I'm with you on that one. How about you, Miss Eden? Anything mixology that you did while the pandemic was raging on?
Just a lot of gin.
It's good for the joints.
Very English. It's for the British. We do drink a lot of gin.
Yeah, you drink it out of just a normal glass. It's not even a special glass. Like just a.
When you throw.
You were going to say drink it out of the bottle then for a minute.
Well, I mean, why not?
As a child from England, I did want to ask y'all something. I actually have written this down. I have watched while the pandemic has been going on, I have watched Netflix. All of Netflix.
Yeah.
But one of the things I got into was British crime shows. Y'all do have some really good crime shows. But do people really drink that much tea?
Yeah.
I mean, I watched Midsummer Murders, and I mean, those people drink some tea now.
Yeah, we
do. I mean, 10 minimum 10 cups a day. I mean, for sure.
Seriously?
Yeah.
We drink a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
You're always offer tea whenever you go anywhere. Do you want a cup of tea?
Yeah, no, I mean, they investigate crime. They go to talk to someone.
We have a lot of murders. You have to drink tea when you've had a murder. It's kind of shocking.
They go back to the station, more tea.
Yeah.
They must spend a lot of time in the bathroom. No, I was like, I'm curious, especially since MA mentioned it in her bio. It's like, I guess you really must drink that much tea. I love coffee, but if I drank 10 cups of coffee a day, my old staff would quit. So, the other question I wanted to ask was, what part of the book that you just wrote did you enjoy the most? So, Eden, how about you?
At the beginning, it's always a bit I like the best. There's lots of possibilities, isn't there? You haven't costed it up yet. So yeah, the beginning for me is the most enjoyable part.
How about you, David?
I can't say the beginning, because when I first start writing a book, I'm always a little unsure about, is it going to work, and how am I going to come up with enough words to actually make a book, and blah 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 blah. And I can't say the end, because when I finish a book, for me it's always a little sad. It's like, oh, I don't want it to end. I don't want to say goodbye. So I think I'm happiest somewhere toward the midway point, where I feel like it's going pretty well. I like what I've done so far, but I know there's more to go. It's kind of like a big party, It's like the beginning of a party is kind of like, oh, how's it going to go? And at the end of the party, it's like, oh, I don't want to leave. I don't want to say goodbye. But in the middle of the time, you're having a great time. So I think I enjoy writing the middle of my books the best.
All right. How about you, MA?
Oh, God. You know what? When you first said it, I thought I enjoyed the editing. But I thought I can't say that out loud. But I kind of do, actually. There's something about when you've got a draft and then you're going back and you're figuring out what's not working and what you need to change, that just, it's almost like tidying up after a party. God, I sound really boring. I don't enjoy the party. I don't enjoy the tidying up after the party's over. I think, yeah. I mean, in this book, I took them to Brighton, which is a place I love from the south coast of England, and I lived there and I love it. And I don't get to go there very often. I really enjoyed writing that scene a lot, actually, because I had to try not to put too much in it, because I had such great memories of being there, and it's a sort of nice scene as well. So I enjoyed that. But yeah, towards the end, I think I enjoyed when I've broken the back of it. I think and you can see the possibilities of it. I think that's why I like the editing part. Yeah.
But I think that is our time, if I'm not mistaken. So thank y'all, everyone, for joining us and for listening to our stories. And I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys. Y'all did a great job. So everyone have a wonderful Saturday, and y'all have a wonderful day. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Ali. Great stuff. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.